Hello, Tom again. What we're up to now is creating our method. It says function there, I'll change that. Our method to output the array and the summary statistics. Okay, so we're going to write a method called showedGradeReport. We're going to pass it the actual array of grades that we created in main in the last video, as well as the percent to feedback delegate that we created in a previous video as well. Internally, it's going to call the calculate grade statistics function. So it's the processing is all encapsulated in that method. And again, it's a method. I wonder how many times I'm going to do that in this course. It'll output each of the marks along with the feedback string that is appropriate. And then again, the overall descriptive statistics. So there's some output guides that we have here. The next thing that we do after that is just piece it all together in main. The big part of that we haven't done yet, of course, is the input loop. Okay, so that's our task at hand. We'll deal with the array output function first. So I'm here in the project. I'm going to put this method underneath main, so I'll just make a little bit of room here for it. I'll start off with a summary comment and just the actual method stub for now. So again, it's called showGradeReport. It's public, it's static, it doesn't return anything, and the parameters are the array itself, which internally it's going to be called marks, and the second parameter, which is a bit unusual, but it's the percent to feedback delegate, which I'm just calling feedback internally. Okay, so that's where we're going to pass the feedback method, which is the delegate variable that we created in main. Okay, so that's the setup of showGradesReport. So the first thing that I want to deal with in the showGradesReport method is to actually make sure the processing happens. So I'll create a grade stats structure called stats. Okay, this is the real one now. I'll also create an integer called count, and what I'll set count to is a call to the calculate grade stats method where I pass marks and I pass stats. Okay, so that will actually do all the processing, and then count will be essentially the size of marks. I'm just capturing that. Okay, so now that all the processing is done, all I really need to worry about is doing the output. Now the easiest part of that output, of course, is the summary stat. So although it doesn't come first in the actual output, I'm going to code it first. Okay, it's just a series of write lines similar to what I showed before. Okay, so the count. Notice that I've got a little bit of some formatting going on here. Okay, so the 0, meaning it's the first variable in the list, comma, 5, that's the field width, n is the numeric format, and 1, excuse me, is how many decimal places that I want displayed. So obviously the count, it's going to end up being 5. There's no decimal places, so this would be 5.0 in a field width of 5. Same thing here with past, a field width of 5. There'll be a 0.0 on the end. And then of course for the average, it'll be the average to 1 decimal place with a percentage sign after it. So before we display this though, we're supposed to display each of the individual marks. So I'm going to use a loop to do that. A for each loop would be ideal for this particular task, but since I used a for each loop before, just to be different in the example, I'll just do a straight up for loop this time. Okay, so for each student, I've set up a counter called student, made it equal to 0. As long as student is less than marks.length, or I could have said count as well, because it's the same number. Each time I increase the student counter by 1, I want to, on its own line, display student, and then what the actual student number is plus 1. So it doesn't go 0, 1, 2, 3, it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next one is going to be the actual grade, so it's marks at position student. Again, a field width of 5 with 1 decimal place. And then the third thing, okay, so position 2 here it ends up being a string. It's the string that the feedback delegate returns when I pass it the mark that we're on. Okay, so depending on which method the feedback actually points to, that'll give me like A plus or A or whatever, a letter grade, or it'll be, you know, outstanding or failure or whatever, or invalid. Um, uh, that'll go right after the actual student grade there. So that should finish off the show grades report method. Now, in order to test that, because I want to, you know, test all these things individually, but that's the last method I have. So how I'm going to test that is I'm going to just simply write main, and hopefully that'll work. I'll find out if it doesn't work as soon as I'm finished writing main here. So what do we have to do? So we have to declare an array of 5 doubles. We've done that. Declare the delegate variable. We've done that. We use a loop to prompt the user for each of the 5 grades using exception handling, blah, blah, blah. We haven't done that yet. We have done this thing, and then we haven't done the call show grade report. So there's 2 steps we need to add here. I was hoping to be able to highlight that really quick, but oh yeah, now I see it. Boom. So we got to do that, and we have to have an input loop. All right, so let's deal with implementing those 2 steps. So in main, I'm going to add to my declaration section a string for user input. So because I'm getting obviously user input, I like to keep it as a string that because if it's something the user's entered in something like non-numeric or something along those lines, I want to be able to show them the actual sequence of characters that they typed in. So that's useful for me. The next thing I'm going to do is launch into my input loop. Now, I guess the order doesn't necessarily matter too much here, whether I'm dealing with this percent to feedback delegate, determining which method it actually uses. But to me, this is all a processing step. So since I'm dealing with input, I'm going to do this first. So I'll start off with a little bit of a loop. I'm going to use a loop to prompt the user for each of the 5 grades. Okay, I'm going to use exception handling. We'll get into that. Just a little descriptive comment there. My for loop, again, I'm using a counter called student, starting it at 0. As long as the student counter is less than the grades.length, I'm going to continue looping. Note though that I haven't done the student plus plus in my for loop. And the reason why I haven't done that is because I only want to increment the counter if I actually have a valid grade. So I think I've provided, if you're in my course at least, a sample program that shows a couple of different ways we could validate numeric input from the console. I'm just going to sort of pick one. I'm going to use the convert.toDouble method and some exception handling because it was specified in the requirements to use exception handling. So let me implement that. Okay, so I'm going to do this in a try block. I'm going to prompt the user to enter in a grade for student number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to capture the whatever they type in on the console, the entire line. I'm going to capture that and put it into user input as a string. And then I'm going to try to convert that user input into a double using the convert class. So convert.toDouble is the appropriate method to use. So if that works out okay, grades at position student will be assigned whatever that numeric value is. And of course, there's a number of things that can happen that would prevent that. One would be I type in chicken or some other sequence of characters that's not appropriate for a double, okay, which is a format exception would be thrown. Another issue might be that although with a double it's pretty rare that this would happen, but it might be an overflow exception. I simply got too many characters, it can't fit it into a double. That happens more often with integers, to be frank. Or there could be a couple of other weird things going on. So I'm going to have a couple of catches to deal with at least the format exception. That's pretty common, and maybe a generic one as well. So assuming that worked out okay and it doesn't throw an exception, I'm going to increment the counter at that point. Okay, so let's deal with the catches now. So as I said, I wanted to deal with two. Okay, so the more specific one comes first, a format exception. I haven't bothered naming the format exception object because I'm not going to be referring to it, the actual exception object itself. And I'm just going to tell the user what the issue is. Sorry, I could not convert whatever it is, okay, the user input string, into a numeric value. Please try again. So give them a little friendly prompt there. And then I also have a catch for the more generic exception. So it'll be like any other exception. And I just basically tell them, sorry, an error occurred. So it's a little more ambiguous what the actual problem is, but they'll have the opportunity to try again as well. So that is essentially the end of my input loop. So I should mark that off here. Okay. The next thing that happens in my program is a little bit of processing where I determine, again, which feedback method I'm going to use. And then the final output of the program is all encapsulated in the show grades report function. So all I really need to do at this point is call it. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to call show grades report. I'm going to pass it grades, which is the array, and feedback method, which I've determined from this bit of code here. So that'll go ahead and run. It in turn will call the processing function, display all the appropriate output that I want, and that'll be the end of the program. So let's test it out. So the first time I test it out, I'm going to put all valid inputs in. Okay, so or not necessarily like numeric inputs at least. So for the first student, we'll put in, I don't know, something like the second one maybe. Let's put in one invalid domain. We'll put in a failure. We don't have any really good marks here. Let's do, okay. So I put in 5 numeric marks, and I've got very good, satisfactory, invalid, failure, outstanding. The count is 5, that's right. Passing, failing, invalid, and the average looks about right. Again, I'd have to actually desk check this. I don't really like how it goes right from input into the output without a little bit of a line break in there. So I'm going to actually fix that problem. Bear with me. I could fix it in main here by putting the console.writeLine just before the call to show grades report, or I could actually do it in show grades report. Kind of advantages and disadvantages of each. Maybe I'll just put it into main here. And there's, really nothing other than a write line. You know what, I'll do a write line with an extra one, so there'll be 2 blank lines. So I'm going to run this again just to see if I like the way that looks. I don't recall the numbers I used before, so let me just do it this way: 44.4, 55.5, 65.6, let's do 88.8, and something invalid. Okay, oh, I don't like that either 100% because now I can't see it all in one screen, but it's good enough for this. So I can see here, yep, these all worked. Those all look good. The average looks pretty reasonable. I think things are working out. The next thing I want to test too, and I'm not going to do the full testing here, but you probably should, is testing all of the input stuff. So if I put in, I have to, it's tradition, I have to put in chicken. Okay, so obviously it hasn't accepted that. It stays on student number 1, which I like. It's not just a one-off thing. If I put in more text, it still stays on number 1, so it is in a loop. Excuse me. Okay, it's accepting numbers that are out of range. it's going to probably accept this number because it's a double, so it accepts pretty huge numbers. Yeah, it did accept it. If that was an integer, it wouldn't have accepted that number. So again, that's enough testing for me, but so there we go. Student number 2 has a pretty humongous grade, which is invalid there. Another thing I probably want to test as well is I'm going to go back to project properties, take out the word description here, run it again. Okay, so enter a grade for student. I'll just put in some valid ones here. And you can see here I'm actually getting letter grades now, so that works as well. So that basically sums up this video exercise on structures, methods, and arrays. Hopefully that was useful to you. Thank you.